over victim 1 and 2. Count 31. Forced marriage, an inhuman act as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)k, insofar as Mr. Konny inflicted great suffering and serious injury to body and mental and physical health by imposing a forced conjugal union on victim 1 and 2. Count 32. Rape as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)g. And count 33. Rape as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(6), insofar as Mr. Konny raped victims 1 and 2. Count 34. Torture as crimes against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)f, and count 35. Torture as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)ci, insofar as Mr. Konny inflicted severe physical and mental pain and suffering upon victims 1 and 2, who were taking no active part in the hostilities for the purposes of intimidation, coercion, and discrimination. Count 36. Sexual slavery as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(6), insofar as Mr. Konny exercised powers attaching to the right of ownership over victims 1 and 2, causing them to engage in acts of sexual nature. Count 37. Forced pregnancy as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)g, and count 38. Forced pregnancy as a war crime, punishable under Article 8(2)(e)(6), insofar as Mr. Konny confined and made forcibly pregnant victim 1. Count 39. Persecution as a crime against humanity, punishable under Article 7(1)h on age and gender grounds, based on the facts underlying counts 30 to 38 of victims 1 and 2. Konny committed these crimes with the requisite intent and knowledge. At all material times, Mr. Konny carried out all physical elements of the specific crimes charged and possessed all attendant mental elements.
Thank you very much, Court Officer. All right. I turn now to the parties on the issue of Rule 122(3). The prosecution and defense both had the opportunity to submit written observations pursuant to this rule on matters that could not have been brought to the attention of the Chamber at an earlier stage of the proceedings. The Chamber gave a date for the receipt of such observations, and it was the 22nd of August, 2025. The prosecution and defense did not provide any such observations, which of course was their right. Can the parties confirm that they do not wish to bring any such matters and that we can proceed with the opening statements? Defense?
Your Honour, we can so confirm.
Very well, thank you. Prosecution?
Aucune observation du côté du procureur.
We have no observation to make from the side of the prosecution.
In that case, then, we proceed to the prosecution's opening statement. Prosecution, keep in mind, you have 30 minutes.
Mesdames,
Your Honours, you have agreed to hold this confirmation of charges hearing against Joseph Konny. The dock is empty of any potential accused. Joseph Konny is not present here today. 20 years ago, other judges of this court issued a warrant of arrest against him. He has been at large for the last 20 years. And for the last 20 years, he has managed to evade justice. This international justice that the government of Uganda and the many victims, particularly in northern Uganda, have sought, as they were unable to render justice in their own country. We have done everything we can. We have done everything we can to live up to the important responsibility that, on the one hand, the founding members of the Rome Statute, and on the other, the beneficiaries of the justice that this statute postulates, have placed in us. Unfortunately, the tentacles of international criminal justice, even though lengthy, with the cooperation of states, whether they be signatory to the Rome Statute or not, have not been sufficient to ensure the swift arrest of fugitives. Many victims who had the strength to survive the horrors of a devastating civil war have unfortunately not survived this lengthy wait. Others have lost patience. But there are still those who, against all odds, have waited for this very moment. And it is for all these victims that it is important for this hearing to be held today, tomorrow, and the day after that. This hearing, Madam President, as you reminded us at an earlier stage, is not a trial in absentia. The right of a person to be present at their trial and to challenge the charges against them is a sacred right, as we know. However, without in any way altering this right, our statute, as you also reminded us, in certain circumstances allows that the suspect does not frustrate by their own will the confirmation of charges against them, in particular by choosing not to respond to the summons of the court. So, it is by virtue of this mechanism, Article 61, paragraph 2, which, as you reminded us, has never been used before. You will be using this, ladies and gentlemen of the bench, to examine the 39 charges brought against the ICC's longest-standing fugitive. These charges that you have just heard read out before the court. These crimes, whose victims include men, women, children, and young girls, will forever remain part of the dark pages of Uganda's history. These crimes include murder, different forms of slavery, rape, inhuman and degrading treatment, and many other acts that the prosecution intends to present at this hearing on the merits. The crimes were committed by an armed group, the Lord's Resistance Army, to which I shall refer to using its initials, the LRA. And in English, it is known as the Lord's Resistance Army. So these crimes were committed by the LRA under the orders of Joseph Konny. Your Honours, Joseph Konny, whom we see here in this photograph, has always been the leader of the LRA, upon which he imposed his cruel vision. He also moulded the group to his own image. It was a true army, a new society that he set up to exploit the young men and women from northern Uganda, young people who were brutally abducted in order to swell its ranks. Girls and young women have been enslaved and subjected to forced pregnancies, whilst the boys were forcibly recruited to fight the Ugandan army. The vicious circle of this criminality meant that the victim became the executioner or the perpetrator, as this court has witnessed in a previous such case. Joseph Konny never wavered in his role. He remained the main perpetrator until the very end, a role that he assumed and exercised with full knowledge of the fact. He is over 60 years of age today, but still on the run, despite all efforts to bring him to justice. And it is in this particular context that the prosecution considered that a confirmation hearing in his absence was justified. This hearing, in our opinion, will advance the proceedings in a tangible way. And this hearing, if, Your Honours, the charges are confirmed, it will allow the proceedings to move rapidly to the next stage as soon as Joseph Konny is arrested and surrendered to the court. And we are not despairing. Your Honours, the events that led to this hearing are unprecedented. The charges against Joseph Konny relate to serious events that took place in northern Uganda between the 1st of July 2002 and the 31st of December 2005. The LRA has been carrying out its criminal activities in this part of the country since the 1980s. This armed group was first known under the name of the Holy Spirit Movement before being renamed as the LRA. And it was within this movement that Joseph Konny effectively rose to power. From 1988, he organized and led this armed group. Konny's forces then waged a guerrilla-type insurgency against the government in power. The armed conflict lasted throughout the 1990s, despite a number of peace initiatives. An extract from the testimony of P0422 has been provided to the Chamber, and this excerpt gives a detailed account of the historical context and background of the LRA. And may I refer you to ERN UGA-OTP-0000966 and 967. I will now review some of the elements of the chronology of this case. The UPDF, that is to say the Ugandan government army, retaliated against the LRA by setting up the Iron Fist operation, Operation Iron Fist, which started officially in the year 2002. The LRA bases in Sudan were then destroyed and hundreds of individuals were killed. Joseph Konny escaped capture. After this operation, most of the LRA units and their elements returned to Uganda. And it was in this context that on the 14th of June 2002, Uganda ratified the Rome Statute. In January 2004, Uganda, that is to say, a member of the ICC at this point, referred the situation to the ICC. When the investigation began in July 2004, the war and the crimes attributed to the LRA were ongoing, and the office was operating in difficult terrain. At the time, many sites were inaccessible. But despite all these challenges, the office was able to gather enough evidence to request the issuance of an arrest warrant, which was initially under seal, against Joseph Konny, issued on the 8th of July 2005. Arrest warrants were issued against other senior LRA leaders, such as Vincent Oti, who died in 2007. There is also Raska Lukwia, who died in 2006, as well as Okot Odiambo, who died in October 2013, and Dominic Ongwen, who was tried by this court. These are the first arrest warrants to be issued by the ICC that were subsequently made public on the 13th of October 2005. Konny is charged with 33 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Your Honours, the tireless efforts of the office, in conjunction with the registry and its partners, to secure the arrest and surrender of the fugitive, have to date proven unsuccessful. From the 1st of June 2006, an Interpol Red Notice was issued. and it remains active today. Other initiatives have followed many other initiatives. Requests for the arrest of Joseph Konny were sent to several states. In October 2008, the European Parliament requested for a plan to be put in place for the arrest of Joseph Konny. In 2012, African Union troops were tasked with searching for Joseph Konny. It was Europe and it was also Africa. And even American troops joined the search. For years, the Ugandan government army made concerted efforts to apprehend Joseph Konny. Civil society organizations launched public campaigns to facilitate his arrest. These same efforts are ongoing today and are not expected to cease until Joseph Konny has been arrested. I will now review some important elements of the proceedings in this case. In January 2015, Dominic Ongwen, commander of the Sinya Brigade, surrendered.
The judges separated his case from that of Joseph Konny, and his trial was held between 2016 and 2019. Dominic Ongwen was found guilty on the 4th of February 2021, and he was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment on the 6th of May 2021. His sentence was upheld on appeal on the 15th of December 2022. After 20 years of searching in vain, we now ask you, Your Honours, to confirm the charges in the absence of the suspect. Through the 39 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes brought against Joseph Konny, we have sought to cover the systemic criminal activity of the LRA during the reference period. But that doesn't mean that we have been able to exhaustively list all of the crimes. That just isn't possible, but at least those that were the most emblematic, those are the ones that we have submitted. Now, Your Honours, the case against Joseph Konny concerns systemic violence inflicted on Ugandan citizens in northern Uganda. This violence was perpetrated by the LRA under the command of Joseph Konny. The citizens of northern Uganda had no choice but to abandon their homes and possessions. They lived in constant fear of attacks and abductions. The impact of LRA attacks on children in northern Uganda has been particularly severe. Fearing attacks and abductions, thousands of children every night had to flee their villages to seek refuge in towns such as Gulu. They travelled at night without their parents just to stay safe. The video appearing on your screens is an excerpt from a documentary released in July 2006 by Journeyman Pictures. This excerpt illustrates the LRA's violent campaign against children, and it is recorded under ERN UGA OTP 00001369 1132 to 1208. The faces of the children you see on screen have been blurred.
The next morning, the kids, cold and tired, began to return.
Survivors still struggle to recover from the ordeal they endured. The social and cultural fabric of northern Uganda has been torn apart, and it is still struggling to rebuild itself. In addition to the abduction of children, there have been attacks on civilians in camps for displaced persons. Civilians were effectively placed in camps for displaced persons within the framework of the counter-insurgency strategies adopted by the Ugandan government, which consisted of removing civilians from rural areas and resettling them in towns and later in camps for displaced persons. At the height of the crisis in 2004, almost the entire population of northern Uganda, or 1.5 million inhabitants, were living in camps for displaced persons, as is attested to in the report at ERN UGA OTP 0044 and page 51 thereof. In the meantime, the LRA grew into an army of several thousand fighters receiving significant support of Sudan. It has established base camps in southern Sudan and receives weapons and military training from the Khartoum government. And here I refer you to ERN UGA OTP 00000966 at page 52 thereof. Even after Operation Iron Fist in 2003 and 2004, LRA violence continued to focus on refugees in camps for displaced persons in northern Uganda. Now, my colleague Melissa Timms will tell you later about the LRA's attacks on several camps for displaced persons. She'll tell you about the pillaging, murder, torture, serious exactions, abuses and abduction of civilians by this armed group. More than 600 civilians were killed in the attacks, purely covered by the charges alone. But the number of unidentified victims is much higher. The Ugandan authorities recorded the moments following one of these attacks. This is an excerpt from the Barlogno attack, which we will hear an excerpt from. You will see Ugandan police officers conducting forensic examination. We have chosen an excerpt that does not allow for the identification of the people filmed. It is at UGA OTP 00210012 and in particular minutes 4:03:23 to 04:36:18.
Vous verrez que des représentations graphiques de restes
You will see graphic depictions of human remains in this excerpt. Our office's Scientific and Technical Analysis Unit analysed these recordings along with other evidence in order to identify the victims. The results of the analysis are set out in the annex to our pre-confirmation brief. The prosecution contends that the LRA considered refugees in the displacement camps to be enemies. Joseph Konny accused them of supporting the government of President Museveni. His motto was clear: if you are not with us, you are against us. And my colleague, the team leader, Leonie van Brown, will explain to you in greater detail the key role that Joseph Konny played in the attacks on these camps. Your Honours, Joseph Konny established a system of abducting men, women and children in northern Uganda. The LRA forcibly abducted thousands of people and enslaved them during the period covered by the charges. The abducted women were subjected to multiple forms of enslavement. They were forbidden to leave the LRA. Partners were imposed on them. They were subjected to rape and other forms of sexual violence. They were subjected to reproductive control, including forced pregnancies, which forced them to give birth in the bush without prenatal or postnatal care. And they were subjected to exploitation aggravated by labour in conditions of domestic servitude. Within the LRA, these women were referred to as wives, a euphemism for forced conjugal partners and domestic slaves. Children were not spared either. Konny abused their innocence, as well as their inexperience, to swell the ranks of his army. He set up a veritable army of child soldiers, and perhaps I will show the last video. Boys and girls, sometimes under the age of 18, were abducted and enlisted into the LRA. Some were abducted on their way to school or from the fields. They were forced to become soldiers or reduced to being childminders or sex slaves. And this is the picture that I'm going to present to you. It presents a protected witness, and for that reason, this part cannot be shown to the public.
Donc, vous pouvez voir sur vos écrans une photo du témoin.
So you can see on your screens a photo of witness P0275, who was abducted at the age of 9 in 2004 during one of the attacks covered by the charges. And this witness P275 stated, and here I quote, "During the period when I was held captive by the LRA, I saw children younger than me being trained to shoot with weapons. I knew they were so young because the muzzles of their AK-47 rifles dragged on the ground when they carried them on their shoulders." And here I refer you to ERN UGA OTP 0044 and page 3407 thereof. P0275 is just one example among thousands of children who suffered the same fate. The children suffered abuse, hunger, and thirst. Many of them died in captivity. In a radio interview in 2002 with the Ugandan radio station Mega FM, Joseph Konny and his deputy Vincent Otti admitted to implementing a policy of abducting civilians and young girls. And here is what Konny said: "As rebels, we do not kidnap children, but that is how we recruit. Otti followed the same line of reasoning. He said, I want to ensure you that the girls we take in and send to the bush are our mothers. We always take young girls who are not infected with HIV so that those who are infected with HIV remain among you. And here I refer you to the last ERN, namely UGA OTP 0023011, and namely pages 3 and 10 thereof. And now I'm going to finish, Your Honours, by stating that children have been deprived of their fundamental rights, their right to health, education and freedom. Their childhood has been stolen from them. Joseph Konny remains untraceable within the meaning of the statute. Today's hearing is a very important step in the administration of justice. The prosecution has only been able to bring the case to this stage of the proceedings thanks to the courage of the victims and affected communities. It is also thanks to the excellent cooperation of the Ugandan authorities, traditional leaders, states, organisations and all partners. Continued cooperation is crucial to bringing Joseph Konny's flight to an end for once and for all. Konny's arrest and surrender should allow the next phase of this case to begin, and if the charges are confirmed by the Chamber at the end of this hearing, as we request, Your Honours, I would like to thank you for your patience and for your attention.
Thank you very much. CLRV representatives, we have 10 minutes. Would you propose to start?
Thank you, Madam President. I think it is best to do the whole presentation at once, and I would suggest that we take the break and I start after the break.
We find that acceptable, so that we will take the break now. It's a bit early, so we compute 30 minutes from now, which would be 20 after 11, and we will return to hear the CLRV. All right then, shall we?
All right, we will wait.